Good afternoon, everybody. We're at the 2 o'clock hour. I don't know if you want to move a little closer. Looks like we have a small group for 2 interesting projects. We have Beth Zoll from Parsons Brinckerhoff to talk about the plan that's being developed for White Plains, and Lou Marquette from Leyland Alliance. We're going to be talking about Stores, Connecticut, a project next to UConn, which recently opened. For those who don't know, I'm Sal Coco from BHC Architects, and I think we have a PowerPoint set up for that to kick us off.
Just by way of brief introduction, I'm Beth Zoll, I'm a planner at WSP Parsons Brinckerhoff in New York, and the goal of, I think, this session is to talk about some precedents and some work going on in communities that there are analogous to some communities here on Long Island, but are not actually here on the island. And so I'm talking about White Plains and the Store Center. So this month, right now, is the tail end of a year-long process of a study on the White Plains Transit District, and they're looking at how to revitalize the area around the Metro North Station. And so for general context, the little red dot up at the top is the location of White Plains. It is north of the city, and as you can see, it's just to the east of the Tappan Zee Bridge, and it's also at the intersection of a lot of north and south. I'm going to try to speak loud and project. I know there's another session going on, but it's also right on the Bronx River Parkway and some north-south transportation systems. So we're going to start at this slide, and we'll come back to it at the end, and this is kind of the impetus for talking about what we did in the plan, and that was working on the vision around transit district. And so when we talk about multimodal, what that means is buses, taxis, shuttles to employers, as well as rail and bike. And so the city is looking to maximize its economic development potential. Essentially, they own a number of properties right around the train station. So this is an interesting series of slides. We're going to talk about, just want to walk you through what it was back in the 90s and the 1920s. It's a little bit difficult to read along the left. It says 1920s. Tree-lined roadways, kind of nice walkable downtown, and as you'll see, we're going to start to transition. It developed a bit more, but through the 1960s and 70s, we moved to a phase called urban renewal, and I heard it during the lunch session too, and you can see what happened here. Large swaths of the downtown are wiped out and replaced by large shopping mall that's almost a mega block in the downtown called the Galleria. There's a lot of shopping malls, a lot of large headquarters of the employers, which is positive for the city, but in other ways people feel it's negative for the urban design, the pedestrian environment, and just kind of moving around the actual downtown is not as pleasant as it once was. So the idea is now to have a community-driven planning approach. We've spent the last year having a lot of meetings with different stakeholders, the business improvement district, different neighborhoods, to get people's input on how they interact with the downtown, why they don't, why they do. Did a lot of virtual outreach as well. We did a whole program called Question of the Week, where people could log in on their computers or their devices and just answer a quick question, rank this, what's your top concern, what would you like to see, what one thing, and got a lot of feedback. We got over 1,000 comments, which for that area, they just haven't had such a heavily inclusive public involvement process. So let's get into the few things that emerged. And these are, again, some things I think we can draw some parallels and find some commonalities to the communities in which you work. the biggest thing we heard is that it's hard for people to move around. People in the cars say everybody's not crossing at the crosswalks. They're just going when they get off the train the way they want to go. So they need to listen. People say, I don't want to bike because it's dangerous. Well, the cars say, I don't like bikers because they come into my lane. And there's just a lot of conflicts of bike and pedestrian movement and wanting to make this better, more easily understandable, and safer for everybody. And so some of the things that they talked about and suggested and wanted here, if I'm going to do it, if I'm going to commit to biking, I want it to be safe, and how can I do that? You also probably hear a lot about the idea of placemaking and making the destination. I think we're going to hear a little bit about that as well, making it a great place that people want to be in and want to interact with. A lot of what we heard is there's no there, right? The station is a parking lot, and what's going to get people there? The downtown in White Plains, as in the little main drag, the commercial corridor, is about 1.5 mile away from the station. So getting people between them is the challenge. And so not only moving people, but giving them a place to enjoy. When we talk about programmable space, you have a farmer's market, food trucks, having musicians, maybe a casual amphitheater, not concert venue necessarily. And then we also talked about the idea of density, the need to educate and get community buy-in on what does that mean, what is FAR? You hear, and as a planner, it's so ingrained in what we do, but you sort of
What is FAR?
FAR, floor area ratio.
Thank you. Okay.
Absolutely. So in the bottom three, I'm happy to walk you through. Thank you for asking. Please be comfortable. The idea that you have a FAR of 2, that means you can build twice what the area is. So the example on the left shows the 2 stories that take up the whole block. In the center, 4 stories that take up half, and then in the third one, 8 that take 25%. And similarly going down along the column, it's taking that different area and distributing it in a different way. So if you just have something that's prescriptive and say you have 2, go do what you want with it, that's not as form-based. It's not saying any guidelines of how you like it to look, and we'll come back to this. So that's economic development, wanting to bring a place and to bring jobs and to revitalize the community. And finally, what we hear the most, even more than pedestrian safety, is parking. We need to be able to park. Just because you have a TOD, that doesn't mean that people aren't going to have cars. I think that's probably pretty relatable here on Long Island as well. So what we did, we actually did a study, and it's a little bit difficult, but the reds are full, and the greens and yellows actually still have capacity. So they tell us there's nowhere to park, but we went out and looked, and there are places to park. And so that that feeds into how do we plan and how do we grow. There are ways to make parking so that it's attractive. Right? These are things that we all took into account as we moved into developing the municipal plan. And so I'm going to get to that in a few images here. So kind of in summary are the idea of wanting to increase pedestrian safety. A lot of this has to do with how people get to and from the station. People, cars, and then they want to see some near-term upgrades to what the station feels like. So for a sense, you're standing kind of on the corner about a block away. Behind where the trees are, it's an elevated station area. There's a parking deck there. You're looking at a surface lot, and it's kind of their signature clock tower to orient you. And so, we did a little bit of a sketch here. It shows there's going to be a new bus service over the new Tappan Zee Bridge. We're planning to have a station located right here to connect people from Westchester County across to Rockland County. And we took it a little and focus here. You're seeing the oval on where the station area is. Looked at short-term improvements. Oops, apologies. Looking at a funny font there. But the idea of how can you take some of what's the surface lot, there are still cars in there, but how can you turn more of that into an open space and amenity, begin to make the sidewalk maybe through art, installation more attractive, and bring people to want to make the station here. The idea of doing this and making this investment right there is to show the commitment of the local government, and then kind of catalyze additional change. Bringing on the development community in the longer term. And so what is that long term going to look like? We're looking at it from a different way, so I just want to kind of reorient you, but you see you see 3 parking lots. The red is a surface lot, the yellow is the station lot that we were just looking at, the parking deck, and then what we're calling the firehouse lot. There's a current firehouse that needs to stay in that service area. It does have the ability to be relocated if move in that direction. So this was, because like I mentioned, next week the plan is actually going to be released to the public, so I can't tell you the preferred scenario. Can't give away the big finish, but all of the scenarios focus on those 4 blocks, and they are different kind of compilations of including public open space. Parking is shown in kind of a purplish. And then the tall, high-rise buildings are actually using the building massing size, so what the zoning would allow, but with some tweaks that we thought about in terms of how do you orient them so that you don't block certain views to public parks. There's a green that you see as the Bronx River reservation. And how do you connect people and move them? You see some green dots up towards where the downtown is to help people enjoy that passageway a little bit better. So, some renderings, and of course, renderings are beautiful, and even more beautiful is when you see them implemented. So this is going to be a hopefully helpful panel. This is what it looks like today when you're looking from the station. You kind of get off the train and you're looking up towards, your office, and it just feels like you're going quite far. And this is a rendering of if you green it, if you plant some more trees, some of the buildings will stay, some new buildings can come on. And again, similarly, this is back to that view of what it looks like as you're, crossing the road towards the station. And then, a potential how it could look. And then we took it kind of the one step further and gave it some of the visualization so people can kind of really get a sense of how it could be. So how do we get there? Or how does White Plains going to get there? Near term, long term, right? Got to sort of take the baby steps to get there. And so they've applied for, New York State has a transit assistance program, TAP grants. They've put in applications for it to try to get some of those pedestrian bike improvements going. In the near term, we'll know in the next few months. They're coordinating with Metro North Railroad to make some sort of lighting and station area improvements. And then the bigger things, in terms of design guidelines, which I think the session wants to get at too, is developing transit district zoning, so establishing what that area is, and then setting forth those guidelines. And then beyond that, they'll set out, reach out to the development community and gauge interest in being able to sell off or develop those properties. So just to finally touch on, go back to the zoning, we've kind of talked about it a couple times now, but the idea of what you can do in the massing, what the letter of the law of their zoning regulations allow, and that's sort of, the white is what it is, and then on top there's sort of these blue boxes saying how big it could go if you were to build out to the maximum on those. Transit district zoning changes could include anything like density bonuses, so you can go a little bit higher, if XYZ, if you give an open space, if you have a certain amount of affordable housing inclusion, if you provide more parking, even though the building next door might do less. So there's all sorts of opportunities to make zoning flexible to work. And the final one we talked about, regulating form. And so if you want something to look like this, you like the way that looks, you want that feel, how can you do that? And so you can do things like requiring a certain amount of transparency in the street wall and on the building's facades. Regulating the setbacks from the roadways, variation of the actual exterior of buildings. Having a parking lane or bike lane required to sort of shelter people on the sidewalk from moving traffic. And in White Plains, traffic moves kind of rapidly through. So I'm going to finish right now with just 3 quick examples from communities here on Long Island that, tying back to, these were on the left are the visions that we used for White Plains. This you're looking at is Hempstead, and I think we just heard about it during our lunch session. The Renaissance downtown. This is the vision, and it really kind of almost looks similar in some ways to what we saw happen and emerge out of the White Plains plan. Second, I'm going to move on to another one that may be familiar, and this is, it's called the Ronkonkoma Hub. And this is another, I'm seeing some nods. So Ronkonkoma is multimodal in the sense you also have air travel and bus and cars and wanting to integrate all those. And so this is the plan that's done also to encourage a mix of land uses and smart growth. And the final one is Nichols Road BRT, which is a proposal that's out, or it's a project that's out. And this BRT is also in the effort to create a gateway, so connecting from Stony Brook to downtown Patchogue. So that's also similar to some of the goals and visions for what White Plains want to do. They want to create this entrance to their downtown. So with that, I'm going to turn it over. I can tab for you or not, and then maybe after we'll have the discussion.
Sounds great.
Yeah, if it can slide over, we can always switch. Let's see. I don't want to go too much further. There you go. Okay.
All right, good afternoon. Now wake up. Now y'all had lunch. Come on.
Sorry about that.
My name's Lou Marquette. I'm actually a builder who's been in this business for well over 40 years of building things. I spent the first 20 plus years doing conventional things, was in Manhattan, renovating historic properties and building some new stuff, working in Florida, California. In my youth, I was a carpenter. My degrees in psychology. I'm not an engineer. I'm not an architect. Okay, just so you know that. But I have been building a lot of things over many, many years. And I got involved with a community group, like you all have in your Long Island neighborhoods here, and doing a visioning process in Warwick, New York back in 1993. Running Johnny Longo and some other people who said, all right, what's our community going to be like in 15 years? What we did. That got me thinking about things differently, just at the point where one of my partners who went to Princeton with Andreas Giovanni handed me the book Suburban Nation, and I'm sitting on my 1892 porch, my little house in a little village, and saying, people want this stuff. And the sort of the combination of those things put us into a mode whereby, the late 90s, we were shifting away from doing what I would call conventional development to doing just new urbanist development. That's what we do. We've become a company that basically just focuses on, we basically just focus on new urban projects. I'm part of an organization that you all probably all know called Congress for New Urbanism. Been involved for many years. There's a New York State chapter. I happen to be on that board of directors with a good friend of your all's here, Eric Alexander. All right. And so Eric asked me to come out here and talk about my Stores project, which is from Connecticut, which a lot of people don't want to hear about sometimes.
Yeah, just the basketball.
Just the basketball team. Well, we're very close to the basketball team. We actually did a restaurant with Coach Gino Oriana. We decided we need a nice restaurant with a name on it, so we put in half the money, and he got some other people together. It was a great restaurant. But let me take you through a little bit of what we've been doing and what we've tried to focus on. And I'll just, here, just the next, is this it? There we go. Okay. These are 4 of our projects that are most notable. The upper left there is Hammond's Ferry, which is in North Augusta, South Carolina. It's a new town along the Savannah River. The city itself set off the river about 2,000 feet. There was a big manufacturing area on a bluff down by the river that about every 30 or 40 years, the Savannah would sort of clean house and say, do it over. After they got 7 different stormwater management ponds, lakes, recreational places now upriver with Storm Thurmond's help, the river doesn't flood anymore into that land. The Corps dropped the floodplain 11 feet, and we were part of a development team that was selected locally to be a public-private partnership with the city of North Augusta, create zoning and figure out how to make it into a neighborhood. We had builders down there. We were a master developer. We had builders build about 200 homes. But right now, the Augusta Green Jackets baseball team is moving across the river from Georgia to South Carolina, which nobody ever thought would ever happen before. We have citizens selling their $500,000 houses in Augusta to move to South Carolina, and it's becoming a whole new place because it has restaurants along the water. There's a lot of different things going on, and there's actually a linear park that's a mile long along the Savannah River that ties into a 17-mile greenway system that we were part of. So it's one of those unique kind of places. If you go to the lower left, there's a place called Warwick Grove, and that house there with the 3 dormers on was our original model. We built that project. That got stalled a little bit midway through the project in the recession, but we were able to finish it and build it. I built a home in the back of this a couple years ago, and I'm now in the process of selling that home and moving to that house with the 3 dormers on it. It's being renovated for me right now. I live amongst my customers. I like it. I like them. We're all on the same page. So that's an addition to a little village that's going to have its 150th anniversary. We have a strong Main Street. All through the recession, we've never had a store vacant for more than 3 weeks because we support the local community. We all really understand it. We're integrated, and part of that was Community 2000. The visioning group was all part of that process, so we understood what we needed when times got tough. And instead of driving somewhere to save $5, go downtown and buy it. And it shows you that you can really do things over a period of time that can make a big difference. In the lower right is North Augusta, is East Beach, I'm sorry, Norfolk, Virginia. Public-private partnership with the city of Norfolk, Virginia. 100 acres of a ghetto that happened to be on the Chesapeake Bay. To the east of it was the Army, was a Marine amphibious base, and this was a ghetto that was just costing the city $3 or $4 million a year. Now that this project is nearly finished, it has 800 residents and is producing about $5 to $6 million a year in positive tax revenue. But the bigger news is that this project has actually spawned another 50 communities of similar look and feel that have actually doubled and tripled the tax base in those neighborhoods. Because everybody loved it so much, they just started copying it.
Was it the traditional design?
It's a traditional design character that we did. We actually, the big thing we did there was we had a 17-home home-orama. Norfolk always wanted to do a home-orama. That's what they did themselves. Yeah, and they brought in 17 builders. They build a house, decorators decorate it, landscapers landscape it, and you have a 2-hour festival, and 2-week festival where you have people come and spend $5 or $10 admission on different days of the week, and all the money goes to the hospital. But you show your wares, and builders try and get other sales and sort of tell their story. And it actually worked out very well because we actually sold 11 of the 17 homes in the first 2 weeks. And it kicked things off a little bit. Anyway, that's enough history. Let's get into a little bit of these, and I'll hit these a little bit. Some of them, I try to make a simple list of what are the key ingredients to placemaking. And the keys here are in very simple language. I try to keep this stuff very simple, okay? It's really important to understand where you are and how you connect with everything. You can't go into your little piece of land and just do your own thing. It's got to have a context. Consider that it's actually going to grow. It's going to evolve. Consider yourself to have the responsibility for a 50 or 75-year view. So as you tie this stuff together, you have to think that broad, all right? Also understand your local context. Where we were in stores, there was nothing other than a university to speak of. So that context actually became regional, but that's okay. You just reach as far as you have to pull it back. And we need strong community leaders. And I'll hit the rest of these a little bit when they go through, as I go through the rest of the presentation, because I got a short period of time. There's a second list that gets into having a lot of talent, have a parking strategy that you hear about. Any of this stuff you want to do is completely controlled by parking. You got to almost start with parking, which is depressing, right? And work your way through the depressing moments, right? And then you can get into the good stuff, right? The design of the buildings and the storefronts and all that. But work your way through it. But in the end, there are many, many benefits for the community, for developers, and for government that are very, very beneficial, because what we're talking about is the way things were done 100 years ago, 150 years ago, the way they've been being done for 400 or 500 years in Europe, right? Which is actually working with the community and getting everybody in. Yes, we grow and evolve. Yeah, these young people over here are going to change everything that we're doing, right? But they should be at the table now. We're getting tired. I'm not really that. A lot of us are getting tired. And we need their energy in. We need their technology. My kids bought me an Apple Watch. I still haven't figured out how to use it. But I have one, because I know that I need it and I can text. I can't talk to you now. They showed me how to do that. Anyway, take a broader view. Here's the property we had in stores. And the lower section of this a little bit, let me do it this way. And the lower section of this is where the town hall was. And this is a high school over here. And then this is the university. It goes way out here and way out into here and way out into there. The property they had was this piece of property, okay? And of this 42 acres, only 17 acres were buildable. They said 18, we said 17. There's a piece in here that they thought we could build on down here. And when we studied the environment, we knew we should build it, okay? But we looked at it in a broad picture, and we had these properties here are existing. We had to work around them, which was a little difficult, but we did it. Right? This was the university. It was a 1888. The two brothers gave their farm to the state to build an agricultural academy. Right? It turned into State University. 26,000 students, 11,000 staff, 11,000 support team, if you would, on the campus, and about 18,000 citizens, about 30 miles east of Hartford. Many would say in the middle of nowhere. Okay? And the picture you have on the right there is what the sort of retail area looked like. That area right there, that was the auto business, and she was the leader of the local retailers who didn't want to be relocated, because everybody from the university and the town and the high school drops off their car there and walks to work and comes back and picks it up. And she does brakes and oil changes and all the simple stuff, right?
Now, what year was this?
That was around
First got involved.
when we first got involved in this, right around 2001, 2002. Here we go, right?
Wow.
The partnership was formed in 2001, Mansfield Downtown Partnership. And that was based on McBride and McBroom and a few other people saying you've got to form a partnership with the university. This is after the university tried to bring in Pfizer to put their international headquarters on a historic horse barn hill and all this stuff, and they got run out of town. So the university was on its back, basically looking for resuscitation when the town came in and said, why don't we form a partnership? They formed what they called the Mansfield Downtown Partnership. They hired an executive director. They actually started to reach out with Tony Rick's Kiss to do a little vision planning. And they actually started looking they went out originally for RFPs. We said, we don't do RFPs. We don't waste $500,000 for you to take 5 ideas, blend them together, and still screw it up. Why don't you do an RFQ, right? And just find yourself a development team. Because if you think you know what you need, you're wrong. We can't tell you what we need because we're not there yet. But why don't you find some people you can trust, you like what they do, you like who they are, you like the credentials of the key players, and you bring them in an RFQ process. And that's how we got it to be an RFQ, and we were selected to be the developer in 2004. This is what was there. There were these little buildings sitting around in a little intersection like that. That's been replaced by this. Okay. That's that little auto dealership that was here when this road was coming down the street. Well, now we've shifted this road to go this way on the other side of the tree that you'll see in this next image, so we can put a town square in. And that's that road now. Instead of going this way, it's actually shifting to be that way. Right? That's that area that was the auto dealership, a little strip center over here, and publications going where they printed, college brochures and stuff. And that's turned into this big town square right in the center of it.
And where's the auto place?
The auto place is behind this building back here. 2 bays turned into 3 bays. Business doubled in size and profitability. She brought in a partner. We built the building. She became the tenant. This is a group that took a happy picture when we all got the consensus on the vision. Took a little bit of time. But what really happened in this was the bigger news was that the group actually started to look at this whole property differently, and we started to understand that we really had to all come together. It wasn't really about us as a development team coming in and telling them what to do. We wanted to hear their vision, and they had to, if you would, listen to us in terms of what was economically viable. In a 3-way public-private partnership between the University of Connecticut, the town of Mansfield, and ourselves at Leyland Alliance, we had to actually develop such a trust that we could have an open book development plan. Here's what our costs are going to be, here's what our timeline is going to be, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We laid it all out, and I'll tell you why that was important in a few more minutes. But in doing so, they had, through this process, now we're probably somewhere in about 2004, 2005, 2006, they had been working for 3 years with 10 committees in town. One was doing planning, one was doing business retention, one was trying to find new businesses, one was looking at the whole thing of preserving the wetlands and wildlife and everything else. There was a transportation committee, there was a finance committee. All these committees were working and bringing people in, and it was their connection as groups of academics, socially oriented people, government-oriented people, and youth that actually started to form the energy of each of those little cells of information. So when we actually started to get involved in the planning, we like to use the phrase, we have a very big tent. We bring a lot of people in. We bring a lot of different professionals in. This fellow right here, Dr. Michael Clemens, is a wildlife specialist that helped us study the land, but it actually happens that he grew up in Storrs, went to the high school, went to the university, ended up getting his PhD in Cambridge in England, and he's a wildlife biologist that focuses on amphibians and all these things in New England. That just happened to be right where we were. It was perfect. You know, we had worked with him 2 years before in Warwick, New York, on a bog turtle issue we had there trying to get things improved. And Newman's office was local. BL Companies is a young, energetic engineering firm with one of their engineers was just in the room here a few minutes ago who helped us with all that stuff. We worked through this, and Stephen Winters was one of the founders of the LEED program, the LEED program.
Yeah.
They wanted us to actually make all these buildings LEED buildings, and we went back to them and said, we can't afford it. This place isn't going to pay high rents. We will do a sustainability guidelines. We'll be open book. You can come one Saturday a month and look at what we're doing, look at the performance of the building, and test this and everything else. But I'm not going to spend $100,000 to $150,000 a building and then another $100,000 to commission it and just have that money just be put into this engineering process. Let's come up with a good way of doing it. I'll get Steve involved. We come up with sustainability guidelines, save $3 million, and put it actually into what we do. Our buildings are performing at about 40% of the energy rate of most apartment buildings in New York. That's what we have going on.
Is it students that are living there?
It's a mix, probably 80% students, about 10% staff, and 10% others. We have quite a few senior citizens actually moving now out of their houses down in the valleys and in the suburbs that are moving into the rental. Part of what happened, this is the adaptability key. We were looking for this to be half rental and half for sale. Then the market crashed, and there we were. We had all the approvals, and what did we do? We had one thing that ended up being the key to it all. We had a communication, relationships with the town and the university. Go back to them, have a conversation, open up our books and say, what's the alternative? We had to rework a couple different things, and we brought in Education Realty Trust, here listed as EDR. They're a REIT out in the Midwest, and they basically do collegial housing. They do apartments in and around universities. The largest one, they just made a deal to take over 5,600 units at the University of Kentucky, the youngest of which was 40 years old. They have a 7-year plan to knock them all down and put back 9,000 units, including food service, and manage it for 30 years. They're really pros at what they do. And they came in, worked with us, formed this partnership, and we formed it basically as each building is a 2-unit condominium, if you would. We're on the first floor with the retail, and there from the 2nd to the 5th is another unit. It's a tax structure that's set up. We each have our own ownership and responsibility, but we can each leverage our properties as we have to.
And there's sewage nearby?
There's water and sewer was provided by the university. It's an on-campus system that they have. Right? So while this was going on, there was this public-private vision that was taking place, a visioning process that started off. Then we got into the whole public-private process, if you would, of actually trying to figure out how we're going to each accomplish our goals. They were looking at various fundraising they were doing to rework the state highway, build a parking garage, and put in the infrastructure. Because very early on in this process, we said, we can't build all this infrastructure. You've got to do this. You've got to go out and find these public monies and see what you can do. They had a lot of support from the state because one of the key assets in the state is the university. What was going on at the state level, the state was realizing back in the 90s, They were losing 80% of the top 20% of students in the state of Connecticut, and only 10% of those that went away came back. There was a brain drain that was going on. So they decided to start funding the university in a very serious way, putting up $1 billion, then another $1 billion. But what's happened is, it's gone from having 11,000 or so applicants for 4,500 freshman seats every year, to having last year 33,000 applicants. What a 20 to 25% jump in the SAT rate that the students are going there. And part of that is the growth of it in the STEM program of bringing much more science and actually going down to places like North Carolina that were running science out of the place and picking those scientists up from Wake Forest and other places and bringing them back up to Connecticut. So there's a lot of factors that got into it, but now they had a place to bring the professor's family so they could actually stand there and walk around and say, wow, I can get something other than UConn ice cream here. There's other things to do and other things to see. We've even got a bookstore that has a 5,000 square foot puppet museum in it because they have a graduate program of puppetry at UConn. Do you think puppetry? Why puppetry? Everybody like The Lion King? That was those students. How about the War Horse play? That was those students. They're involved in animation and movies and all kinds of stuff because they think differently than any of us sitting in these seats today. But there's a small group that's there that's doing that stuff. So let's take a look around. We got that funding, where in the end we got $25 million worth of state and federal funding brought into the project. And it took them 7 or 8 years to do that. But on top of that, we put in $240 million. All right? And that's the biggest shift in this whole thing. It's really not going to happen in these rural places where there's that much of a heavy lift if you try and get a development company to come in and do it all. We can't charge high enough rents to get there. It's just not in the numbers. So you have to find a way to get some public money or find a way to create some other incentives to make it happen. And I'm just being real so that you don't get lost in the weeds here with the drawing. Okay? The biggest key to this whole thing ended up being this right here. That's the parking garage. That's the parking garage there. 7 stories high, 680 cars. It was a gift from the state of Connecticut to this project. Because it was the only way to get the density and to get the long-term tax asset if we didn't have the park. We got a little bit of surface parking here. We got a total of about 1,600 cars, like 1,580 cars, 680 of which are in that garage. The rest are on a state highway that's been renovated over here, and parallel parking on all the streets and stuff that you'll see around the whole project. Right? The second thing that happened was we got a federal transportation grant that came from the bus transportation pact. That Little Bulls Community Grant, that funded this intermodal transportation center here. And that transportation center is right here, hooked up to the garage, and now the transportation came out of a parking lot on the campus if you want to get to some other place other than the university, and it brought it into the town center. And these buses, including this bus that goes between Boston and New York City, is hooked up with intelligent transportation so that you can actually find out when that bus is going to come on your phone. And there's signage up, and inside the lobby of this is also a place that has all that signage up and a lot of information. But what happened is by putting this together, the library put a branch inside of here that I should have shown you, where you can actually return books and pick up hot books and work it off the desk that's in the transportation center. It's all starting to weave in because everybody wants to come into this. That transportation center is right here in the middle of this project, right there. Okay? And again, remember the university is across the street, the high school, and the town here. That's a state highway, about 18,000 cars in the morning, another 18,000 in the evening. And this is what we had to work around. So this blue material here was our first phase. Our second phase, actually from an economic point of view, was going down here to build a supermarket, a little out parcel. And then we built the second phase in here, and in the end, we went in and built these for sale products in the back that you'll see here. But note the stats here of these various phases. We've got 172,000 square feet of retail on these first floors. Okay? And we got 660 units of housing. And all we have left is 3 to sell. There was such demand here that they have only had 1 day of 1 apartment vacancy in a building when somebody got too loud and they throw them out. They're charging rents for 12 months. After 11 and a half, you leave if you're not upping. They got 56 people on the waiting list. They have a commitment to fund half of the parking in the garage. They sell the spaces to their tenants. The community was so worried about the garage, they forced us to operate it for 15 years because they thought it would be negative. We knew it wouldn't be negative because they didn't pay for it. All they had to do was operate it and maintain it. So we've been splitting the profits with them since the beginning. The town gets half and we get half the profits, and we manage it. And that parking operation manages all the parking on all the streets, all the ticketing, all the towing, everything is done through that. One of the keys to this thinking it through, though, to get the retail to work up here in the middle of nowhere, you actually got to think through and have a strategy on this retail. So you actually get involved in how much are you trying to create, how are you doing it in phases, how are you going to roll it out, how do you keep it kind of special and exclusive and not have 3 pizza shops, 3 people selling pizza. You know, are you dealing with percentage rents or not? We've actually put a lot more into these buildings. A lot of developers trying to build a plain vanilla box and expect the tenant to show up and do all the work. We thought it through and did some math, and we actually went ahead and we put in the air conditioning units, did all the line sets up to the roof, all of our condensing units on the roof, because these buildings are all 4-sided buildings. And we actually were able to bring in heavy gas lines and water lines and 200 and 400 amp 3-phase services in those spaces. So there was so much there for the tenants that we could actually get strong rents. We were hoping to go in here around $24, $25 a foot. We're getting upward of 30 at this point. And in today's world is giving us some really strong tenants. And you'll see here on these next slides that we've got some things as simple as a 240-child daycare center to Amazon's 4th pickup center store, where they paid over $30 a square foot to be here. But they were delivering 3,000 to 4,000 packages a day to UConn campus, and it was taking the kids 4 to 5 days to get them, and they were losing them. So we actually put the center in, and they're having these kids get the notice on their cell phone. It's here. You walk in, put your cell phone on a screen. Door pops open, you grab it, and you walk out. All right? And Uber's waiting for you outside. It's pretty wild. There's Gino's restaurant that we did at Gino. Blaze Pizza is a new hot pizza concept. You will walk through a line, there's 40 different ingredients. You put it on your pizza, and you have a pizza in 180 seconds. That's 3 minutes. I didn't tell you that you have to wait in line sometimes 30 minutes to get that pizza in the oven. But, you know, again, there's a lot of young people around. But we brought in some strong business. This is a CVS that's in one of our key spots. That over there is UConn Medical Facility, 18,000 square feet of doctors. That building's 160 foot deep. We thought we were going to give it away for $5 a foot for storage bins at one point when things were really bad. And UConn said they wanted to come in because they heard Hartford Health was moving in the property next door. And as soon as they went in, UConn said, we've got to get in there. And they came in at $28 a foot and took that whole space. Ooh. Yeah, that was a goodie. CVS has another store up the road, 1.25 miles, with a drive-through, right? And they came here, and at first they said they wanted a drive-through. We said, we can't get a drive-through. They said, okay, we'll take it anyway, because it's on the square. It's on, and when you look at the next slide here, they're off to the right on the square. This is the town festival that we're doing. There's a stage up here, and CVS is on this side of the square on another street. To the point where actually CVS, when we went to raise $1.5 million for the square to build it out the way we wanted, CVS came up with $100,000 as a contribution to the square. That's how much they were committed to the whole place. And we put in $250,000, the university put in $250,000, and the town put in $250,000, and we raised other money privately. So there's the bookstore back there. There's the puppetry theaters here. That's Gino's restaurant over here. One of the key things we did is we went into, we did some research while we were doing the planning. There was a place called the Vanilla Bean Cafe that was about 20 miles, 25 miles away. And if we asked anybody where they would go and have a nice experience, they kept saying the Vanilla Bean Cafe, the Vanilla Bean Cafe. So we finally said, okay, we got to go find these guys. We found out they had another place that had done. There were 2 brothers, and they had opened that one up. And we basically said to ourselves, we've got to get them in. They're going to be a strong anchor. As soon as we announced that they were in, we had 6 other vendors were right there on top of it. That was a key piece. So we gave the space to them, probably about 60% of the rent with a 3-year step up until they came up to reasonable rent. But they were key, and they put in a lot of money, spent about $1.2 million on their space, and they are the hub of the whole community. Last little piece here is various types of housing. These are little townhouses that we built in the back. These are just being finished. These are 1,060 square feet, 2 bedrooms up, 2 baths, powder room down, and 1-car garage in the back off a little lane, selling for $289.
So the parking in the back.
Parking's in the back.
A walkway.
Yeah, there's little views in between them. These are the apartments. You can see what's outside of the buildings. These are the apartment, granite tops, nice kitchen, stainless steel appliances. We started renting these for our partners, EDR, renting them starting somewhere in the vicinity of $1,000 a bedroom. They rent them, 2 weeks, not by bedroom, they're unfurnished. But they put kids together, kids come in as a group, but now they're up to about $1,275 per bedroom right now. 1 bedrooms are around $1,600, 3 bedrooms are around just short of $2,000. Public benefits. You can see here yourself the stats and how things went.
Did it make the college more desirable?
Made the college more desirable. That's why there's 33,000 applicants for freshman positions instead of 11,000. Yeah, very much more desirable. And so there are benefits for the community that are large. We're the largest thing on the grant list in the town right now, the largest taxpayer. But for the university, they were actually able to pour more people in and bring more people in, and all of a sudden it gave them a focus. They could attract the right staff. You get the right staff, you get the right graduate students, you get the stronger applications, and one thing takes all of that. So this is the project, if I can maybe outline a little bit. This is the university here, that's the art school and the high school here. And our projects is this little parking lot and all these buildings all around here, back around the square, all these buildings around the little out parcel, that's a supermarket. We had to renovate the post office down here to get this road to come through. That retaining wall is 22 feet high and there's wetlands right behind it. This project had an enormous amount of wetlands around it. We studied it significantly and we actually recharge all the stormwater in the existing patterns. So we support the wildlife, salamanders and frogs and all the stuff in that wetlands to the extent that the Army Corps of Engineers and the state released us from any mitigation. Zero mitigation for taking 3/4 of an acre in a wetland. This town had a wetland agency for 19 years and never gave up a piece of wetland. But we were able to get them to give it up because it was in this vicinity right underneath this garage and it was completely ruined by this property not mentioning stormwater. So that's how. And this is sort of the money shot that a college student took one morning, about 6 in the morning, over the town square and some of our buildings. Store center. That's very good. All right.
See any potential of that other site being developed, the one in the middle there, or?
Well, he's actually structured all his leases to end in 2022. He's 79. He's going to leave it to his kids. We'll see what happens. There's roads connecting it, and there's utilities already set there for it.
What would you plan for that?
It's the town and ourselves. Yes, sir.
Question. It's less important for a place like stores, but you showed us South Carolina,
Yeah.
and that raises the question of integration,
Yeah.
racial integration.
Yeah.
How did you deal with that at all?
I don't see it. Not something that comes up for me. Everybody mixed up. Never had any issues.
And the community allowed that?
It's the law. Yeah. Yeah.
South Carolina.
So,
That's why I know better.
no, everybody's mixed in our communities everywhere.
Okay, good. Okay. You also raised a question now. Those are rather high rental prices. What's the affordability in these stores?
Well, there's probably a good 3,000 or 4,000 other apartments that rent between $500, $600, $800 a month per bedroom. All right, so there's a lot of other opportunities, but there's nothing that's walkable to the university that has high-end finishes, that has very low energy use. You save $500 or $700, $50 or $70 a month per bedroom, just the way we have our energy. We're almost getting no gas reading. The buildings are just almost being heated with the lighting of the buildings the way we've insulated them. But meanwhile, we have continuously negative pressure fans in the bathroom bringing fresh air in through the cracks around the windows and stuff like that to keep air fresh. But we do it at a rate that is healthy to the space and not detrimental to the energy. Anybody else?
I'm just curious about the scale. So this is like a 5-story.
Yeah.
And as it relates to White Plains, and it seems like that scale is probably much larger.
Yes.
And I don't know if the, this kind of village flavor that this has, is that, what is the main intent, I guess, long-term, to have, it's going to be a walkable, it'll be much more urban, it looks like.
Right, so part of the study effort was a market study, and we looked at what is appropriate, what is their sort of appetite for, and it is residential. There's currently private properties just outside the 4 that we were talking about, where they're going up, and they're between 15 to 20 stories of residential, and they're luxury residential. The city, to probably preempt your question, has a 10% affordability requirement, and so developers typically adhere to that. I don't think they yet have the bonuses and system in place beyond what those negotiations are either on a one-off basis. But there is a big demand. White Plains is both a destination and an origin in terms of commute. They're noticing a lot of reverse commute patterns as well as traditional
People
commute
from the city
patterns.
coming.
People from the city coming up for jobs.
So it's so that also has implications on what kind of needs and demands there are for the parking, as well as
Because the court is there.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
White Plains is also a little bit broad in its traffic. I mean, its roads are wide,
Right.
its sidewalks are wide. It's like, I gotta walk across all that.
That's exactly, right, and so not only the roads within the city are city-owned, but some are county-owned, and so there's a lot of hesitation. It's harder to have those county-owned roadways changed, because they're not within the jurisdiction, it's more complicated, it's a lot more coordination. So potentially adding a lane of parking to slow down, to narrow maybe 4 lanes to 3. And bump outs on the corners so that, people, the pedestrians aren't having to cross as far.
I didn't mention, we renovated Stores Road and we wanted to get 80 parallel parking spaces on the road, and the state would not let us do it. Again, having a relationship with the community, we started a letter writing campaign to the governor and everybody else. We had about 4,000 letters were written over a period of about 6 months. We ended up getting 66 parking spaces, parallel parking spaces on the street. Because basically we forced them to start using a context-sensitive design characteristic that they had in the state traffic laws, but it was not being employed. They had nobody in the state office to even implement that strategy. But we finally started to get it. Somebody was assigned to it. We worked our way through it. So there are ways to do it if you understand those laws and get into the weeds a little bit. Yes, sir.
So it appeared that a parking strategy was part of both projects. And we went so far as to say, I think that the key to making, sort of activating your project was the parking garage, and then that the notion of sort of perception of lack of sufficient parking, which I think is not uncommon on Long Island. Can you talk a little bit more about how parking played a role in the redevelopment strategy? And if that challenge was over, how the challenge was overcome? I guess from that perspective, the perception challenge, maybe?
Sure. And so that's appropriate. The question of parking, where are people going to go, how are people going to move is appropriate or is relevant in the near and long term. So the lots that the city owns are currently 2 surface lots and 1 deck. So to start anything, it's almost like the first step is we have to move some cars away. And so that immediately, the town traffic engineer says, well, what do it's revenue for the town, so it sort of hits their bottom line to take away the spot. So we have to think creatively, that's why we did the parking, conducted a survey, how much of it is actually being used, and are there places to displace if you make it very clear. And also the idea of separating, kind of divorcing the uses of the taxis are right where the people are waiting in the kiss and ride, they're coming to pick up their passengers and everybody, and people are crossing wherever they want to cross, and it's sort of this mess. And so separating out these uses, designating roadways and waiting areas is part of the near term, and then in the long term, the city's stance is essentially a net zero effect on parking. So we won't take away any spots until we've identified whether it's locating some on streets and nearby or actually designating certain other spots around in the vicinity of the station or station commuter parking. That's their approach.
We were a little bit more aggressive about it. We went to the town and said, well, when it comes down to looking at how we're going to park, if we deliver your vision, your dream of what you want, we're going to have to probably go more towards 6 or 8 story buildings. Because the rest of it's going to be parking. Or we can get a parking garage, which effectively would use about an acre, use about 0.6 acres, okay, for a parking garage. That would effectively give us 4 more acres, 3.5 to 4 more acres of developable land, which would bring us down to where we could have buildings that were closer to 4 stories and 5 stories.
Well, that also changes the economics of the building, right? You could still do wood frame and still you might have to go to
Right.
non-combustible.
We'd have to go to non-combustible, push everything up, make the apartment smaller,
Yeah,
all right? Make
change the
everything-
equation.
Change the whole equation significantly. And but we were lucky. We were lucky because they had good relationships with the state, and there was some funding available in the state for that kind of thing, and they were able to get their hands on it. And it changed everything. If we had to go build a garage, we were planning on spending somewhere around 18 to 19,000 per car. But part of what happened, this is probably something that I would lay out to locals to really consider, is that by working together in your community to build consensus, to have a good long-range plan, I'm talking about 15, 20-year plan, where you build consensus, you have the older people, you have the younger people, people are really into it. When it comes along, that there are grants and things that you can go for, when these garages are available, or when parking's available, or when transit-oriented upgrade funds are available, having that community consensus, having everybody in, having no opposition, having it be shovel-ready is how you get the money. So today, you cannot take the chance of not planning and think you're going to get the funds. You're not going to get the funds. By the time you do it, there's a town in New York that had $3 million offered to it. If in 1 year it could figure out how it's going to take the $3 million to deal with a floodplain after Sandy, blah, 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 blah. At the end of the year, they were about ready to shoot each other. There was no plan, and the funding went 5 towns away. They lost it all. And so we in Orange County Citizens Foundation, a not-for-profit, just like Vision Long Island, I'm on that board, we've actually been brought in to help get them into a plan so they can be ready for the next round. And I'm doing that as a volunteer citizen. So the key is to get your plan out ahead of it. By getting this parking together and having it funded, we were able to have parking in a place where the citizens just said, I'll never go in that garage. You won't be able to get me in that garage for anything. Parking is 2 hours free in the garage. You get a ticket. And after that, it's $1 an hour. If you want to go to a restaurant, there's no place to park on the street. People are using the garage. Now everybody loves the garage. It's raining, I want to go in the garage. I get my umbrella out, I open the door, I come down on the elevator, it's a whole glass wall, I get to see the whole town, I get this view, I'm up 7 stories in the air. I'm actually trying to get the town, that's a great shot that I should have in my presentation, from the top of the garage, where they can actually, if they put in little rings in the concrete, they can put tents up there and have weddings up there. Because it's the best view in the town. It's up above everything, it looks out 20 miles, you know, in every direction. And you could really have a kind of wild venue for people their age to have a wedding, as opposed to going to some place like this. It's a little...
Vision Long Island.
Yeah, exactly.
Good.
More questions?
One of the strategies that I often have seen in plans for where there are lots of wide roads is the shrinking of the roads. Did you deal with that in any way with the white plan?
So we had people commenting on both sides of that exact debate. You know, some people say, yeah, the roads are too wide, you know, it's too hard to walk, it's not inviting. And other people who drive through the area or live and try to, you know, travel around say, no, don't touch the roads, we need them, otherwise it'll be gridlock. So you know, we certainly have both sides of the equation. What we've looked at doing is, as I was saying, where there's roads that are 4 lanes, looking at either doing a protected bike lane, so using one of those lanes, and using some of that to create the shoulder, so reduce it from 4 to 3. But we didn't do anything more than take one lane's width of traffic. We didn't propose doing anything more than reducing it by a fraction. And part of the assessment also looks at, doing a traffic model and what would happen to the levels of service on these roads. Kicks into that environmental impact process. It's already pretty heavily traveled, and so if you're going to add more people, add more buildings with a potential transit, discounted number of anticipated, if people are coming in and locating right by the train station, you anticipate they may not be traveling in the peak period in their cars as typical, freestanding apartment buildings. Hopefully there's more transit-oriented use, but there are certainly still some car traffic.
You still have heavy traffic in those areas.
Absolutely. Today,
I've been there.
yeah.
I've been there. And just, you get out at 5 o'clock, you wait like any other city.
Right, and so they say, don't take our lanes
Don't
away.
take our
White
lanes.
Plains is a small town.
What's that?
White Plains is a small town.
No, it's not. And it's got interstate highway systems running through it in a couple different directions, and the rail running through it. It's got its topography issues. It's got its challenge.
Yeah.
But it can be done if people come together, if they want to do it.
Well, absolutely, it's adopting a vision, it's getting the community involved, just like you say. So when the development community wants to come in, it's not, oh, here's what we think we want to do. What happened, the story there, and I'm just going to get into it a little bit more. 10 years ago, they did exactly what you were just saying. They put out an RFQ and they said, okay, development community, come tell us what to do. And it didn't work. It was a big kind of flop. People said, no, why are you giving it to the developer? Well, we haven't told you what we want. They're going to tell you. It's, it was a big sort of uproar because the people didn't feel that their voice was being heard. And that's what, as in the planning community, and that is the goal, to gain consensus, to make it better, to economically revitalize and to keep it moving, sort of balancing all the parts of the equation. And so here they are 10 years later, and now, the mayor wants to really move this forward, and I hope to see it be as successful as your story.
And I just heard that Google gave its big funds for cable TV and communications and all that stuff to the city of Columbus, Ohio. Well, you may not
Smart
know,
city,
but yes, Columbus, Ohio is the largest city in America because there was a merger between the county and the city many years ago, so it's this huge place. And Johnny Longo from American Planning Group went out there and did a visioning where they had almost 2,000 participants in this big theater of a place, and everybody did the I like and don't like thing on the little clickers.
Visual preference.
Visual preference stuff. And it really pulled the place together. It got them to think about planning. It got them to think about their zones and their neighborhoods and their connections and all this stuff. So guess what? When somebody's got a new initiative looking to put some money in and try and test something out, Columbus is on that list. It's on that list because they're down the road. They're thinking about it. They know where they want to go. They got it all together. They say, we want to do this. Everybody stands up and says, yes, all in favor, aye. They go do it. So that's the reason to do what you're doing here and keep doing it. And I have to tell you, if there's one thing that's really important today, it's getting the young people involved. And it's a hard thing to do when guys like you and I show up with gray hair and ask them to get involved, They're like, huh? I don't want to listen to those guys. But you really have to say we're putting together a 25-year plan. Where do you want it to be in 25 years? Because I know you don't think you're going to get married now, but you will. And you'll have kids, and you'll be thinking about them and their schools and their transportation. And you're sitting in traffic and where you're going to go to the theater and where you're going to eat and all those other things. So now is the time to plug in and start saying what's important to you and educate yourself. You all know how to do that between the web and movies and YouTubers and everything else. But try to get in all that information and bring that to bear with what might be an older constituency that's sitting up on the town council. But you can even start to step into that a little bit and take a seat and go for it. Because we need the youth, we need the technology. We need people that really know how to use these damn things, and get them to work, So I think there's that kind of opportunity that's there. So don't fear it, If you're willing to serve, and try and do the right thing for the right reasons, step up. You'll get a lot out of it, I can tell you. I'm much more energized when I leave one of these events or leave one of these planning sessions, even when it's taken 3 days, than I am when I went into it. because of all the young people there, all the energy that's there. Because it's not about anybody's one idea having perfect ideas, right? It's all the ideas coming together, and even the bad ideas have an ingredient in them that are catalytic to the good ideas, right?
It's a nice way to put it.
That's what happens. You know, so we say you can't do that for these reasons. Well, the answer to that question becomes an ingredient in the solution. So understand that that's the kind of stuff that can happen. So get up and go. Get into it. It's a dynamic place, and the times are changing. What's really going to happen probably with the new Washington group that we have is going to be more public-private partnerships and all kinds of alternative ways of funding. The checkbook is thin, but the opportunities are not. Things will be coming. Spend your time, do your planning. Things will happen.
Well, that's terrific. Did you have something to say?
Sure. I'll wait to hear it. I can see you over there. Go ahead.
So, you know, one theme that I know Vision feels strongly about, and is something that is clearly apparent in both stories, is the importance of community engagement and getting buy-in, ideally upfront, as opposed to in a reactive way. And I think both stories are success stories, although at different points in the process. I feel like inevitably, regardless of how bottom-up a planning effort there's always opposition. And sort of the ways in which you overcome that opposition can shed some light on how comparable challenges can be overcome locally here on Long Island. And I know that some of Beth alluded to the fact that the road diet question was one issue that was contentious, and that there were people feeling on both sides of the equation. And Lou mentioned the issue of building height, which is, again, something that Long Islanders can very much relate to. In both situations, you know, and those are just two examples, but how did you each overcome some of the hurdles that may have come about through the public process?
Sure. So, you know, in ours, I think one of a telling story is at one of the first public meetings we had. You know, a little woman came up to me and she said, "Where's it going? You know, what are you building? Where? Show me where it's going to be." I said, well, I appreciate the engagement, but I don't know what you're saying. You know, where's the station going to be? So she was under the impression that we were putting a train station somewhere different than where the station. You know, just the idea of communication and keeping it open and keeping it flowing and letting people know that decisions have not necessarily been made. I guess people may be under the impression that, you know, the public meetings are just for show and the decisions are made and we're just, you know, giving you lip service. None of the development scenarios had even been, you know, begun, and she already knew, you know, it's going to be something and I'm not going to like it. So for those people, you may never be able to get them to your side. But what you can do is say, well, what's important to you? If there's going to be a building, how do we want it? You know, how do you want to be able to move around it? What are the important factors? And so hopefully, you know, there's the give and take and the compromise of getting some of the attributes that they want and maybe something they don't want. As far as the roadways, that those decisions are as of yet undecided, but like as I was alluding to, you still want to be able to guarantee, or as much as you can in terms of sort of responsibility to the ethics of traffic. You don't want to be you know, putting yourself in a gridlock situation where we as the consultants are giving our clients a design that we think is going to be, you know, dead on arrival. So it's balancing, you know, sort of physical needs, aesthetic desires, and, you know, and economic bottom lines of how do you make a project work and profitably for the city.
Part of it is it's a bit of a process in that that negative energy that you find when you show up and do these things is fear. Okay? Fear is a very, very strong human force. Okay? The fear actually comes out of a lot of things that were not done very well in the 70s and 80s. Okay? We know that. We can point to what they are. But you can't tell people that. You can't get into that. Okay? So part of what you have to do is let all of that out. And I like to use the idea a little bit of a cauldron, a kettle, you know, with a lid on it, you know. You can't just go over and just rip the lid off, you know, when it's boiling like crazy, you know, when something is really cooking. You have to just let it happen. You have to let all that out. You have to let all that energy out. Because most people, this is where my earlier training in academia came in, most people are, when they get to these things, they have so much inside they want to say that these are closed. They're not taking anything in. So the whole thing is a process of getting all that out. To get it out. And you can't let anybody who's sitting at the table poo-poo it. It's a dumb idea, that's an old idea. You gotta let it out. You gotta be as neutral as you can, and you gotta get it all out. And then somewhere in that process, somebody has to say, and it can't be anybody who's in leadership has to say, you know, if we keep doing the things we've been doing, we're going to keep continuing the pattern that we've had in the last 10 years, which is decline, deterioration, not doing anything, not bringing economic development, not doing this. We've got to do something different. So you got to get to that point where people start to say, okay, I get it now. I'm ready for something different, but I don't want it to be too big, and I don't want it to be too fast, and I don't want it to be too this. And say, okay, well, let's go through what that is. Let's go through the timetable. Let's go through the cost. What's really important? What do you want? What do you want here? What do you want here? What do you want here?
But it
Now
always seems
you
like
bring
people
it-
were more willing to open up or change after 2008 when everything almost completely fell apart.
Well, because they were looking at the abyss a little bit. You know, people were looking at empty storefronts and all that stuff and said, wow, we can't be as tough on signage, and we can't be as tough on this and tough on that. The reality is that the signage is important. So you can't let up on the signage regs, but you can't let somebody, you can't force somebody to go to 6 planning board meetings to get a damn sign approved. So there's got to be a process that makes it healthier for everybody, but you want a better sign, right? So identify what your real goals are, and then try and say to yourself, how do we make this happen quickly? How do you get it done? Workshops, this, that, and the other. Bring the sign person in to sit down with staff and go through it all so they understand the regs a little bit and say, this works, this doesn't, this is the regs. Simple, bring it back next time, we'll approve it, done. Those kind of things. But part of it is getting people to actually feel the upside of the creative process, to pull something forward. And you can't do it, it doesn't happen in one meeting. You gotta let people go home and think about it. Watch something on TV, read an article, see a documentary on CNN or, you know, Channel 13 or whatever it's going to be, so that they see something come. Then they come back to me and say, I've got a good idea now. Well, thank you very much. And all of a sudden this person that was against you is leaning up. They got their elbows on the table and they're being positive. And they can start to speak to it, because when you actually start to bring things forward, like Eric was saying, the most important thing for the council, for the elected people, you know, is to have people saying yes, yes, yes. Yes, yes, yes. And then all of a sudden there's very little no. We're ready. This has been planned. We're ready for it. These guys are ready to do it. Let's get on with it. So that's the way to do it. It's a process. So start early and get everybody involved. Don't let people say, I'm not coming. Go to the VFW. Go to the League of Women Voters. Go to a quilting club. Go everywhere. You know, just get people involved and get them out. Get their children to get their grandparents out.
Make them part of the process.
Make them part of it.
And now that they need to, see, somewhere along the way, they have to start seeing the results of what they've been saying, actually in the plan and actually being done, otherwise they'll back out.
But you can't, I mean, the hardest part of it for guys like Duani and people who I've used on projects, the hardest part of it is that we did a visioning in Newburgh, New York, which never happened. We spent $250,000 on that. And in the end, it never happened because, you know, somebody would walk in the room after a week of meetings and say, I didn't know this was going on, I haven't heard about any of this, and stand up and take a soapbox and pontificate, because that's the kind of town it was, you know. And it's just one of those kind of things that we did. We worked for 6 months to get the communication out and everything else out, but then the town did not have strong leadership. We raised $1.7 million to study the combined sewer stormwater system and what the solutions were and everything else. We raised the money. We went through contracts with the city and said, okay, we got to manage this. We came back, half the money was gone to solve some consent orders they had with the DEC on some violations they had, and it just went downhill from there until we finally said, we're out of here. And we had 30 acres on the waterfront, all that green grass and all that sloping water, but in doing it, Lonnie and his team, we brought 52 people to the shred. Cost us about $160,000, and we replanted the whole city, the whole avenue, which was 190 foot from building to building. There used to be a playable car down the center. We put a median down. We broke that long boulevard up that was like the Wild West with squares that you drove around as inner city circles and all this stuff. It could have been great. We were ready to have. We were lined up to do a tactical mechanism. setting in the first square some weekend in summer and have people actually experience it and everything else, and the leaders just got cold feet and stuff.
Indeed, you never know.
All right?
Thank you.
Have a good day, everybody.